Welcome back to Inspector Toolbelt Talk. How are you, David? Good to have you back on.
Doing great. How you doing, Ian?
Hey, not bad. Hey, we today are talking about overcoming imposter syndrome. And I thought it'd be good to have David the Swede on because he is our master psychologist. Just joking, he's not.
That's true, though. Everybody thinks I'm Swedish, but I'm not really.
Yeah, you're just really good at psychology. But this came up because I was listening to another podcast, and it's actually, if you ever want to look it up, it's called The Free Dive. It's by a good friend of mine up in Maine who owns this marketing firm, and they market all over the world for these big time companies, lots of large insurance companies and things like that. And they did a podcast on imposter syndrome. Well, it wasn't on imposter syndrome, but it was part of the podcast. And it got me thinking of how much that actually affects large companies and people within those companies and their marketing and their business growth to the point where it was a big topic of their conversation. So I talked with you, David, about how this affects us in the home inspection industry. And it actually cut some deep roads into our industry and how we work as a business. So I'd like to
Yeah.
read what imposter syndrome is. It says imposter syndrome is when you doubt your own skills and successes. You feel you're not as talented or worthy as others believe, and you're scared that one day people will realize that. Did you get the same kind of definition from that, David?
Yeah. Yeah. Made me think of that SNL skit. I can't think of it now, but
Lowered
uh,
expectations?
no. Debbie Downer. No. No, but when he says you are pretty and you are special. What is that? It's like Mike Myers.
Probably, yeah. I think I know what you mean. But when it comes to business, I find this in our industry to be one of the hardest things to overcome with my marketing clients. And I usually find out about this when I ask them for their bio. Like I'll say, "Can you give us a bio? Just a couple sentences on yourself. We'll expand it. We'll make it sound pretty." And we invariably get, "I'm not good about writing about myself. There's nothing special about me."
Mm-hmm.
And then we dig in, and they're like, "Well, I own 2 successful construction companies. I was a civil engineer, or I did this and I did that. I have 3 great kids that I raised, and I'm an awesome grandfather." I'm like, dude, this isn't imposter syndrome. You have things to build on. I do
Mm-hmm.
want to caveat this. I am the king of imposter syndrome. If imposter syndrome
Wait,
were a
isn't
pair of
isn't
sneakers,
that a
I'd
paradox right there?
a paradox that I'm the king of imposter syndrome. Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. It's a paradox. But if imposter syndrome were a pair of sneakers, I'd be the Michael Jordan wearing those sneakers. Just I am the king of imposter syndrome. It limits us, though. It
Mm-hmm.
limits how we can market our company and how we can grow our company when we're always sitting there thinking, you know what, this is just, for lack of a better term, dumb luck where I got or what I'm doing.
Yeah.
When in reality, there is a measure of circumstance that happens. Like you became a home inspector at the right time in the right place and had just the right marketing material. But ultimately, there was another guy doing the same thing and he didn't make it.
Mm-hmm.
So there's always a measure of circumstance. But in reality, there's a lot of us involved. What
Yeah.
did you come up with of some things that imposter syndrome limits us on with our business, David?
Well, first, I actually came to think of myself a situation that happened a few weeks back when I was training, and the guy I was training is like, "I didn't think I'd have you for my trainer. I've heard you on the podcast." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm not a famous person or anything, but it's easy, you know. We do things that, you know, not everything that we do is something that everyone can do. I guess that's the bulk of it. Um, to a child, everything an adult does is really impressive. But then when we get up to a certain age, um, we think that everything that we do is something that anyone else could do. But in reality, we might have training, we might have abilities that actually are, special in their way. Just hard to recognize that sometimes.
Yeah. I I think that's a good point. The perspective of a child. A lot of times we don't realize that we are good at something until somebody actually steps back and goes, "Wow, you're good at that." And it's funny that you mentioned too with I called somebody, they needed a website, and I called them. I'm like, "Oh, okay, I'll give them a call." Josh was busy, and I called them. They're like, "Whoa, you're the Ian?" And I'm like,
The
"I'm like the Ian." I'm like, what does that mean?"
There's a few million out there, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, no, but it's like we never have an accurate perception of ourselves. We've talked a lot before on the podcast about humility. There's always going to be a level of humility that we need in business. We're going to need to stop and say, well, this person could do it better than me. This person might know more than me. And we are, the old phrase, we are a student of all men. In other words, everybody out there, man or woman, can teach us something. They're better at us than something else, and we can learn something for them. And that's a great, humble attitude. But that also takes a reality check of saying, hey, we're good at something too. So I talked about myself having imposter syndrome. I was talking to a good friend of mine, and I was just being like, oh man, it's just coincidence that things worked out this way and that way with business, and Inspector Toolbow's doing great, but it's just this or that. And he goes, just shut up, dude. He's like, you were a successful contractor, you're a successful home inspector, you're a successful marketing company, and then you have a successful um, um, home inspection software. He's like, at some point, you just got to stop. And that's stuck with me. And then I listened to my other friend's podcast. I'm like, oh, okay. There's a measure of humility, but there's also a measure of what am I good at? And I think that really
Recognition.
applies. Yeah, yeah, exactly. That really applies to a lot of our clients that are home inspectors who don't see their own value, who go on the side of too much humility. So they kind of, what's it called? Self-deprecation or something like that. I think that's the expression where basically you think less and less of yourself and make yourself look less than others. But it really does have an effect on our business. I thought of a couple. First of all, marketing. It's Dunning and Kruger, the Dunning Kruger effect, if anybody wants to look that up. When we're really smart, we think we're dumb. When we're really dumb, we think we're smart. So sometimes the wrong guy is aggressively marketing. We might think, oh man, if I market, they might see how bad I am. Or what if somebody calls me back with a question that I can't answer, especially new guys just starting out? I'm like, listen, it takes a lot of skill to be able to walk into a house that you've likely never seen before, and in 2 to 3 hours, figure out everything that's ever happened to this house, know everything about the building standards from the time period it was built, what's going on in the house, control the situation with agents and people and lots of questions, and then half predict the future of what's going to happen with this house while identifying defects in complex situations. Dude,
Yeah.
if you can do that, have some confidence because you're doing it. Like these guys call me, I've only done 5 inspections. I'm like, you've done 5 of the most complex situations that a human being can be asked to do. That should engender some confidence, don't you think?
Yeah. Nah, for sure. Yeah. One thing I read about it in my research too was when it comes to preparation. So I think that's probably a big part too. That like if you have imposter syndrome, you feel like you have to be very well prepared for everything that you do, and if you don't prepare, you feel like, okay, now people are gonna realize that I don't know what I'm talking about because I didn't spend all this time beforehand researching it. So, going into a home inspection and you haven't done all this research beforehand about the house, looking up all the paperwork, someone might feel, okay, they're going to catch me in something that's wrong and think that I'm, just lying to them.
Yeah. And that I think that goes back to basically what we were saying before of not having the confidence. So, are we going to walk in and find something that we don't know? Yeah. We have to count on it. That doesn't mean we're an imposter. In fact, the other person who doesn't have imposter syndrome, they may walk in and they're like, "Oh, I've never seen that before," and everybody goes, "Really?" And they're like, "Yeah, let's look it up together." And everybody's like, "Okay." In reality, nobody really cares. They care about how we handle it. Now, if we go down there and we're all like, sheepish and we're like, oh, I've never seen this before, I don't know what to do, or they get that impression from us, man, now it's a
Don't trust you.
self-fulfilling
Yeah.
yeah, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like, I knew
Exactly.
they would know. It's like, no, it's just how you handled the situation. But
yeah, I mean, no one's gonna fault you for looking something up. We never, unless you're very cocky, you're not gonna go in there saying I know everything. I don't have to ever look anything up. Because I mean, I've seen on the international forums too, like there's a constant conversation. I saw this for the first time. What is it? How should I describe this? What is the practice that I should look at? Of course, you hear always some people, they say you should know this, but there's a lot of back and forth too, where they help out, because it's just a matter of fact. You can't possibly know everything there is about any subject.
No, and no matter, yeah, and I guess that's the balance. I see some guys that are like, you'll never meet anybody that knows more about a building than me. It's like, really, that really limits your knowledge if you walk into a room like that. But then at the same time, we can't be afraid of things that we don't know. But I see a lot of the imposter syndrome in the Facebook groups, and I think that's really where it comes to the fore. Like, guys are like, they ask a question, they're like, oh, hey guys, I'm new, I don't really know, this or that, and somebody's going to figure out that I don't know what I'm doing, and everybody gets on them and they're like, you should know what you're doing. When in reality, it's like, listen, if you've done construction for 15 years or whatever, and you've taken all of these courses, you have your licensing, you passed the National Home Inspector exam, it's like, you know more than the average guy. It's just our own insecurity about what we think other people know compared to ourselves that kind of gets in the way. But that blocks us from so much. Going back to marketing, I see guys that'll market really hard because they're confident and they do really, really well. But if we're going to be sheepish and be like, oh, people are going to figure it out, we're going to hold back. We're not going to aggressively, in a nice way, hand out our business card to everybody we see. We're not going to walk into the event and be like, hey, I'm Ian, I'm this, I'm that, and really market ourselves hard. It's a mental block more than anything else. And I find that with the websites, and I'll bring that up again because I hate it when a guy tells me I can't sell myself. And I have to beg them for anything. I'm like, just tell me where you grew up. Are you certified? Are you licensed? Just give me something I can expand on it. And then after I expand on it, they're like, oh, wow, you made me sound awesome. I'm like, even just a couple of things made you more qualified than everybody else around you to do a home inspection. The average teacher, engineer, doctor is not going to know as much about a home as you. I didn't add anything to what you told me. I just expanded on it. I made it sound good because you know what? It is good. And you were downplaying it, and I'm presenting as it is.
Yeah.
So,
and you'll find that too, like when I read about someone's and their qualifications on the website, it does motivate me to use them instead of someone that has the generic, I've been a home inspector for 5 years and that's about it.
Yeah. It also, even in our phrasing, like I actually had to go to, what's it called, an optometrist, the eye doctor. So the eye doctor, and I looked on their website, and one of the websites was kind of like, hey, we know you have other choices, but we'd like to be your doctor. It was just kind of wussy. It didn't sound very confident. And it was like they had imposter syndrome, like it's a new doctor or something. I went into the other one, they're like, hey, we're a fantastic doctor. We're XYZ certified. Here's a picture of where we do our eye exams. I called them and they're like, hey, we have you covered. Nowhere in there did I say, I bet you they're an imposter. But the first one I did, because it was a self-fulfilling prophecy. If we have that mentality, the average human being is going to smell that all over us if we have imposter syndrome.
I just can't walk in something.
What's that?
If you were making websites for an optometrist, would you make sure they were like a little bit blurry?
All the texts are like, I can't see this.
Because strains are hard. Why is the font so small?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because she had me read off some information off of my insurance card. She said, "Can you read that off for me?" I'm like, "No, I think I need glasses." And there was like this long pause, and then she started laughing. But it also affects us in our business growth and our team interactions. So if we have imposter syndrome, it's really hard to grow our business because we're always worried about it failing. Have you ever met any inspectors that are kind of like that? Like they at the point where they could grow their business, but they're so worried about it failing that they don't push forward.
Yeah. Yeah, no. It's interesting because, I don't know how many people I've trained by now. I know it is a lot. But you do see a whole range of personalities. But you can always tell some of them, they're just very timid with their own accomplishments, while others are, very boastful. Which we're looking for the happy medium here. Just being just enough assertive that you can really bring out what you bring to the table.
Yeah. So we've talked about how it prevents growth. It prevents growth because we're always worried about failing. So, we keep our prices low. There's another one. We keep our prices low because people are worried they're going to find out that we're not worth what we want to charge. Like, we feel we're worth $300 in inspection. I think this is the big one. That's what we think. When we could be charging $550, but now we're like, now I have to live up to that 550. How do I do that? And the imposter syndrome really, really pokes its ugly head through when it comes to our pricing. So whenever we mention pricing on this show, I almost invariably get an anonymous angry message or post on Facebook or something, but I'm going to call it what it is. If we have that level of confidence tempered with humility, we're going to charge what we're worth. If we're not, are we afraid of failure because of imposter syndrome? Well, I'll fail. I'm worried about failing because I feel like I didn't do this. I feel like it was just circumstance, and I don't want to rock the boat. I have a perfect little temperature here. When in reality, that's probably not the case. It's probably the case that we are doing inspections because we're good at it. And our price is not the only variable because even an agent who's looking for price is still not going to refer us if we do a terrible inspection. So obviously we're doing a good inspection. And we're probably worth a lot more than we're giving ourselves credit for. So it's a nice little study to look up imposter syndrome. It's more complicated than we're making it out to be, but it really inhibits business growth. It inhibits price increases. It inhibits growing our team. Or if we have a team, I've met some inspectors that kind of have an imposter syndrome like me that have a team. It's like, oh man, everybody's going to figure out that I'm an idiot. It's like, no, your team likely likes you, and not my team, not you, David. I know you already don't like me. You've told me that, but but it imposter syndrome is basically an insidious form of insecurity. So, what's a way that we can get over imposter syndrome, knowing that it's basically hurting our business? What do you think?
I mean, a lot of times surrounding yourself with people that build you up instead of drag you down. It could be a sad fact that part of your syndrome comes from feedback from unhelpful friends. Yeah. If they always tell you, about your failures, always pick on you for what you're not doing as well as they think you should, it might be time to look for some new friends.
Well, and some of it, along with the lines of what you said, may be deep rooted. I remember Preston Kincaid being on the show, and he's like, there's a lot of reasons why a lot of us work hard in business. And sometimes it comes down to insecurity. Like maybe we were told we would never amount to anything as a kid.
Yeah.
Maybe we had a hard time growing up and we don't feel like we deserve any more than what we have. There's some deep issues there. I mean, I'm not a psychologist, so I'm not going to
You need a
pretend
couch.
to be. Yeah, we need a couch. But whatever the reasons are, I think what you just said is important. Surround ourselves with people who have a real objective view of us. They're like, you know what? You are a fantastic home inspector. You know what you're not really good at is answering the phones. Oh, well, I can outsource that. Okay, cool. Have a real objective source of information,
positive feedback.
positive, and we do need some negative. We don't want all positive.
Well, I mean, I don't really like the term negative feedback. I think positive feedback can be items that need to be worked on, just put in the right way.
Touche. Very touche. Yeah. So negative feedback is
I
positive
showed an
feedback.
example at the same time. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You corrected me, and that was positive feedback. So that is good. It's funny. We'll joke that sometimes our wives are our best critics because they kind of have this objective view of what we do and how we go about it. Like sometimes my wife will be like, "I think that was the best way," and she's nice about it. She's like, was that really great?" And I'm like, you know what?
Did
That
you really
probably
mean
wasn't.
that?
Yeah, did you really mean that, or did say that back out loud to yourself and and let me tell me how you feel about it. I'm like, all right, fine. But find someone we can trust. We don't want to be barraging people we trust all the time with our insecurities. But you say, like I just told you, a friend of mine telling me, "Oh, just shut up. You were successful at X, Y, Z, and this is just another pattern of that." It's like, oh, okay. You know who reminds me of that is Nick Gromyko. A couple times on the show, he always talks about he's like, I could never do this or that because I'm too insecure. And he's like, that's why I have 14 businesses. And then after the 14th business, I'm like, hey, I'm good at this. He got over his imposter syndrome over a very long period of time. But at the same time, it's also led to some successes. The process of overcoming his imposter syndrome has led to successes. Yeah. So it's actually good. The more we kind of feed ourselves, okay, what am I actually good at? Okay, you know what? I can do a full home inspection. And people are like, oh, wow, this is fantastic. I can charge more. The overcoming of the imposter syndrome can lead to a lot of business and life success, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. And every time you successfully do that, it'll keep building on that foundation that, gives you more confidence going in.
Yeah. It's important, though, that we don't let insecurity drive our business. I think that's one of the biggest roads to burnout in business. Because if we let insecurities drive us, then we just keep working more and more and harder to prove to ourselves and everybody else that we're a success. But that's letting imposter syndrome drive us. We don't need something external to do that. We can internally say, you know what? Okay, I'm good. Yeah, I'm comfortable with this. And overcome that imposter syndrome. Because we're not imposters. Listen, everybody listening, we don't want this to be a TED Talk, but if you can get through a whole home inspection, you know more and can do more than the average person you will ever meet. Compare yourself to other home inspectors, that's one story. But 99.99% of the population, if you can do a full home inspection, congratulations. You're not an imposter. You're doing an important work that most people cannot do. That's a skill. You should be proud of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Recognizing that can really help you to, get over it.
Yeah. Anything else you want to share with us about imposter syndrome there, David? This was kind of a spatial kind of episode. I thought it was important though, because it comes up so much. I'm people are going to figure out that I'm not as good as a home inspector as I advertise I am, or whatever.
Yeah.
And I thought it'd be a good subject.
Aren't you worried that people are going to find out you're not as good as a podcaster as people think you are?
Yeah, I'm really not that great though.
You're good at talking. I mean, that's something.
Well, I talk a lot. That's like saying I'm good at swimming because I splash around in the pool a lot. Yeah. How much you do something and skill are usually two different things.
That is true. But I mean, usually skill comes from doing the same thing over and over again a lot. So you're building up a record of talking.
Yeah, what was it? Kim was editing one of our podcasts, and she's just like, "How come Ian's podcast side of the podcast is so much longer than the other person's?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that's a problem." So,
yeah, it is interesting when you edit the audio because you see the whole stretch of the audio. What do you call it? Spectrogram? Is that what it is?
Sure.
Yeah, so you see the spectrogram. You can compare the two sides. Ian is always dominating the conversation.
Yep. You see, but there's also too my imposter syndrome coming out. Is I'm like, oh man, I got to fill air or I talk. I just talk. It's just my nature. But
well, usually like awkward silences don't work great in podcasts. That is true.
like that one. So, anyways, we got weird again here on Inspector Toolbelt Talk. But listen, don't let imposter syndrome run your business. Step back, take stock of what you're good at, and don't compare yourself to other home inspectors. Actually, objectively look there and get over the imposter syndrome. If you get us for a website or whatever, send us a real bio. Have confidence. You do an important work that not a lot of people can do. But David, thank you for being on, and everybody, thank you for listening in.